Anxiety is a shame mechanism. I am going to explore anxiety as a shame mechanism. My name is Carolyn Cowan. I am a trauma therapist. I specialise in shame. I have written a book, Shame, The Path Out of Hell. And here we are going to explore how anxiety is rooted in shame. You could be anxious because you have a hospital appointment coming up. And that's one thing. Please, if I use the word valid, don't think I'm saying that any other type of anxiety is invalid. I'm not. But a hospital appointment, let's say, or a driving test or an exam could well trigger anxiety. But that is not chronic anxiety. So chronic anxiety is where you have been feeling anxious for 3 months or more. Actually, that's how it's defined as being chronic. And at that point, anxiety becomes a disorder. So you may have been anxious for years. And the weirdest thing is, just my own personal experience. I got sober when I was 31. And I've been sober for 34 years. Let me help you with the maths. I'm 65. So I've been sober since I was 31. Clean and sober from drugs, alcohol and gambling. And the thing about sobriety is it gives you an identity, you know, go from being really naughty, you know, taking all sorts of illegal drugs and misbehaving and getting drunk and being a black sheep in the family, and get sober and you put on this kind of shiny white unicorn suit. Now you're good, you're special, you've done this thing. Nobody necessarily is thrilled, but one's sense of self is slightly different, because somehow, even though recovery is challenging, particularly at the beginning and the middle and at 34 years later, you have this initial idea that somehow you are redeemed, which is interesting. And I was sober, clean sober from drugs and alcohol and gambling. And then I hit a point in my sense of myself at 45, when I really recognized that I was highly, I don't really like the word trauma, but I was really traumatized in my thinking. I was really anxious. And it wasn't until I was 45 that I kind of owned how anxious I was. So sometimes it can be a real shock if you actually recognize how anxious you are. And obviously, on one level, there's an epidemic of anxiety fueled by COVID and phones and whatever we're watching and looking at. There's an epidemic of anxiety. But to actually own and come to terms with the fact that you are anxious is a thing. It's a hard thing, I think, at times. And so I owned I was anxious at 45. And then I decided to take myself on, and all of that taking of myself on, concatenated, it's a word I like, conflated, came together with recognizing and understanding, oh my God, I have huge amounts of shame. I had never understood it. No therapist at the time had talked about it. I had not understood how much shame I had, and how shame-based I was, and how much I was shaming, and how available I was to be shamed. So that's the drama. That's my experience, is really taking it on at 45. And so all of the work I do now stemmed from that awakening or that awareness. Anxiety is a really interesting thing, because anxiety is, coming back to something I talked about in another video, if you have an experience of abuse and trauma, then you're going to have shame. And what happens is that the experiences of abuse and or trauma, however you got shame when you were younger or medium or older, lots of different ways you can get shame. And you can have lots of different shame experiences over your life. And the earlier the shaming and the abusive stuff started, the more likely you are to accumulate. That's not me saying that, that's just known. The more likely you are to accumulate shaming experiences or negative experiences or whatever. The thing with anxiety is that anxiety is where you do not trust yourself, you do not trust the other, and you do not trust the universe. You do not trust yourself, you do not trust the other, and you do not trust the universe, because whatever experiences you had when you were little, medium or older have fractured your sense of yourself and your ability to believe in yourself, to trust yourself. Shame is an internal mechanism. And so you fundamentally believe that your you're unworthy, you're incapable, you're toxic, you're contaminated, you're too little. And so anxiety, it's a fascinating disorder, anxiety, and it plays out. You know, you can just be anxious, but it's highly likely that you're anxious as well as self-harming, or as well as an eating disorder, or as well as addicted to something, or as well as constantly scrolling, or your anxiety has manifested itself as OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. Lots of different ways. Anxiety rarely, very rarely, sits all on its own. But it might be that that is all it is. But anxiety is, it plays out as, if you think about this question, how old do you feel when you're anxious? I asked this on the short recently. How old do you feel when you're anxious? It's highly likely that you feel really young. You might feel 3, you might feel 5, 6, 7, 10, very, very young. And actually, if you've never been aware of this, it's worth noticing how interesting. I feel really young. Anxiety is a fantastically young state of being. You have dropped, in psychotherapeutic terms, you have become a younger version of yourself. And so anxiety is this terror of the world. You do not trust yourself, you do not trust the other, and you do not trust the beneficence, the goodwill of the universe. And of course, you know, come back to me and say, why would I? Have you any idea how hideous it is at the moment? And there it is. This, you know, this existential angst, because anxiety is the brain, this part of your brain called the amygdala, this tiny little thing, 2 of them, on either side of the back of your brain. In your lower brain, this amygdala is using the references of your past, what happened when you were little, medium, or bigger, and awful things happened to you and they weren't dealt with. It uses that as a storehouse of data. And then it projects how appallingly awful it could be in the future. So anxiety is the pain of the past, the fear of the future. And then if you have a phone, and if you're not careful with how much you lick your phone, use your finger to lick, to constantly scroll, you're looking at the news, you're looking at all these things that are absolutely, fundamentally, very cleverly designed to trigger your anxiety, because your anxiety is where you don't trust. And then the very clever thing about not trusting, it's reinforced by your phone, the violent television, TikTok, all those things, YouTube. Here we are, we're on YouTube. So if you have anxiety, you are available to be triggered all the time, because you have not the resilience to say, don't think that scrolling on TikTok is really working for me. Maybe I'll put that down. I don't think that looking at the news, because the weird thing is, yes, of course we should have a political opinion, and yes, you're constantly invited to be offended, and yes, you know, the world is going to hell in a handbasket and it's a shitstorm out there. I get it. But the really interesting thing, and you have to ask yourself, how much can you actually do about any of it? I know that's a really sacrilegious question in this time, because everybody has the right to be really offended, and I know I'm being contentious, but also, if you can't do anything about what's happening in another part of the world, in another crisis somewhere else, there's a really interesting question. What can you do? What are you doing? What could you do? I know that you could stretch and calm yourself down, and then you'll actually be much nicer to be around. You're not creating a child state of dependency all the time for others to look after you, because that's what anxiety is. And that's, I know that's horrid of me. That is not very nice, because obviously if you're really, really anxious and then people have to keep telling you you're okay and stroke you and soothe you, you're a child, you're moving through the world as a child, and that's fine. That's your right. You don't have to grow up. Why would you want to grow up? It's absolutely horrible out there. Or is it? Because actually, you know, I'm looking at my recording device to make this video, but also, you know, there's a beautiful outside there. The universe appears every day, and the world is perfect. And right here, right now, it's absolutely beautiful. It's peaceful, it's quiet, we're chatting, I know it's a one-way conversation, but anxiety is a really interesting thing because anxiety is rooted in shame. You are fundamentally believing that you're incapable in yourself, that the other is going to hurt you and the universe has not got your back. And here's the hardest part about all of that. Something I talk about a lot, which is if you wake up every day and you wake up and you go, oh my God, I hate my life. Oh my God, I'm really scared. Oh my God, everything's so dangerous. Some version of that. They may not be your words. The universe listens and goes, yeah, we can do that. And on one level, you're complicit in the endless drama. That's a horrible piece of information to put on you. Scrap that. But if that's what you're doing, the universe is meeting you with that. Actually, your phone is wired to pick up your stress. Your period tracking app, your phone with its screen looking at you, is reading your gaze all the time and working out if you're unhappy and should it send you more awful videos, because obviously the more unhappy you are, the more your amygdala wants you to look. So what are you telling the universe? But if you wake up and you look out of the window, you open the curtains or you pull up the blind in the morning and you go, wow, I get another go. Wow, the world is amazing. Oh my God, it's so beautiful. Look at the sky, look at the rain. Oh my God, it's so windy. You don't have to use the word God. You can go, wow, just whatever works for you, but you change your dialogue with how the universe presents itself to you. Because if you think about every step that you take in your day, you're pulling the universe towards you. So there's a give and take here. So if you're in love with the universe, then I define her as a she is just going to go, oh, I will make the most beautiful sunset for you. I will give you the most fabulous rose. I will give you a dandelion and a crack in the pavement for you to go, oh, isn't that lovely? The more you can notice the beauty, the more the beauty appears. And it's a really curious thing, because as you change the dialogue with the universe, as you change the internal dialogue with yourself, and you stop constantly focusing on the pain of the past and the fear of the future, you land into here and now. So anxiety is rooted in shame. I've slightly been distracted off topic a bit in this conversation, but basically where anxiety is rooted in shame is where the primal wound means you do not trust. And then you set up a mechanism that means that you keep reinforcing the lack of trust. And I'm saying, change your behavior, get into a positive dialogue with each day as it appears in front of you. Because as the famous words say, the moment of power is now. It's you, it's your brain, it's your mind, and it's your body. What are you doing with it? Change what you're doing and the universe will appear differently. Absolutely 100%. Ask me questions. Ask me questions on my YouTube channel. Ask me questions about shame. I'm happy to answer them. It's a fascinating topic.